The night was cold and silent. A thin mist moved slowly over the empty streets. Shadows stretched across the stone walls, and the lamps flickered weakly as if they were too tired to shine. The human, Daniel, walked alone, his coat pulled tight. Around his shoulders he was tired from a long day of work at the repair docks, his hands still smelling of oil and metal. All he wanted was a warm bed and silence, but silence broke that night. It broke with a sound so soft that at first he thought it was only the wind. A whisper, a whimper, then a cry, a childlike voice calling out, trembling and weak, "Please, come with me." Daniel stopped, his breath caught in his throat. He turned his head slowly, scanning the shadows. At first he saw nothing, only piles of broken crates and the narrow alley cutting between two tall buildings. But then he saw her, a small alien girl standing half hidden in the dark. Her skin was pale with faint glowing lines like veins of light running across her arms and neck. Her large eyes shimmered with tears, reflecting the dull lamp glow. She was shivering, barefoot, and her clothes looked torn and dirty. Daniel froze. He had seen many aliens since humans first came to this city, but never like her. She looked fragile, like a bird with broken wings. Her voice carried a weight of fear that pressed on his chest. "Please," she whispered again, pulling at the edge of his coat sleeve with her small hand. Her fingers were thin, almost skeletal, yet they glowed faintly with a soft blue light. It wasn't the glow of health or beauty, but the glow of someone who had suffered too long. Daniel's first thought was to walk away. This was not his world, not his problem. Humans were already unwelcome in many corners of this city. Helping an alien child could bring him nothing but trouble. He had debts, worries, and no time for strange cries in the night. But something in her eyes held him. Something raw, desperate, unbreakable. It was the kind of pain no one could fake. And even though every part of his mind screamed at him to leave, his heart refused. "What do you want from me?" he asked softly. His voice echoed against the damp walls. The girl only repeated, "Come with me." Her lips trembled, her eyes wide as if shadows themselves were hunting her. Daniel glanced around. The street was empty, but he felt the weight of unseen eyes. The city was known for its secrets, and sometimes people disappeared into alleys like this and were never seen again. Still, his feet moved forward. The girl's hand slipped into his, cold and shaking. Her small grip pulled him gently but firmly toward the alley. Her steps were fast, almost frantic. She looked over her shoulder every few seconds, as if she expected someone to leap out at them. The air grew heavier as they entered the alley. It smelled of rust, damp stone, and something sour. Daniel's heart pounded louder with every step. He had no idea where she was taking him, but he knew one thing. This was no ordinary cry for help. The girl didn't speak as they moved deeper. Only the sound of dripping water and their hurried footsteps filled the silence. Her shoulders shook with quiet sobs, and sometimes he heard her whisper under her breath in her own alien tongue, words he couldn't understand. But the fear in her voice needed no translation. Daniel thought of turning back. He thought of pulling free and running to safety. But each time he looked down at her small trembling frame, he knew he couldn't. He had never been anyone's hero. He was just a mechanic, a tired man with nothing special. But tonight, for reasons he couldn't explain, he could not abandon her. At the far end of the alley, a dim light flickered under a broken door. The girl stopped there, her shoulders shaking harder. She looked up at Daniel with wide, shining eyes. "You will see," she whispered. Her voice cracked, broken with both fear and hope. "You will see why I called you." Daniel's chest tightened. Whatever lay behind that door, he knew it would change his night, maybe even his life. The silence pressed in again, thick and heavy. The girl's tears caught the faint light like crystal drops, and the human realized this was only the beginning. Her secret was waiting in the shadows ahead, and once he stepped through that door, there would be no turning back. The girl's small hand pulled Daniel forward. The broken door stayed behind them, but the alley stretched on like a throat swallowing them whole. The deeper they went, the darker it became. The lamps from the street no longer reached here, and only the faint blue glow from the girl's skin gave him light. Daniel felt his breath grow heavy. He looked back once. The street was already gone, hidden by twisting walls and dripping pipes. A thought pressed hard against his mind. Why was he following her? Why not turn back? But each time her voice whispered, "Please." His feet kept moving. The walls of the alley were cracked, covered, in strange alien markings, symbols scratched in with nails, circles, and crosses he did not understand. Some looked fresh, as if someone had drawn them in a hurry only hours ago. Others were old, stained with rust and strange colors. It was as if this place had been claimed again and again by people who never wanted to be found. The girl moved quickly, her bare feet silent on the wet stone. Daniel noticed she did not stumble, though the ground was broken and sharp. She knew this place. She had walked here many times. That thought unsettled him. Why would a child know? Paths hidden so deep in the city. The smell changed as they went further. It was no longer just damp stone. Now it carried rot, mold, and smoke. Daniel's stomach tightened. He felt like he was stepping into a place the city had erased, a place meant to stay forgotten. The girl suddenly stopped. She looked over her shoulder, her glowing eyes wide with fear. Daniel froze, listening. At first there was nothing, only the dripping of water from a broken pipe. Then he heard it, a faint shuffle, footsteps far behind them, slow, steady, following. Daniel's chest burned as if fire had crawled inside. He wanted to ask who it was, but the girl pressed a finger to her lips. "Don't speak," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Just come." She pulled him faster now. The alley bent and twisted, sometimes narrowing so much he had to turn sideways to pass. Rusty doors lined the walls, but each one was locked or broken. He felt eyes watching from cracks and holes, but when he looked closer, there was nothing there. Only silence and shadows. After what felt like forever, they reached another corner. The girl pressed her hand against a stone wall. To Daniel's shock, the wall moved, swinging open like a hidden door. Behind it was another passage, darker and narrower than before. "Wait," Daniel whispered, pulling back slightly. "Where are you taking me?" The girl looked up at him, her lips trembling. "You must see," she said. Her voice was so soft, so broken, that it made his chest ashy. "If I show no one, they will all be lost." Daniel's throat felt dry. He could still hear the faint echo of footsteps behind them. If he turned back now, he would meet whoever followed. If he went forward, he would walk deeper into a secret. He might never escape. Either way, he was trapped. The girl tugged his sleeve again. Her eyes glowed brighter with tears. "Please," she begged, "don't leave me now." Daniel's heart pounded like a drum. He sighed and stepped through the hidden opening. The wall closed behind them with a heavy scrape. The alley was gone, swallowed by silence. Inside was darker than night. The only light came from the girl's glowing veins. It painted her face in blue and silver, making her look less like a child and more like something fragile, almost holy. Her tears glistened, falling silently down her cheeks. The path sloped downward, damp stone beneath their feet. The air was colder here, carrying the sound of whispers. Not one voice, but many. Daniel slowed, straining to hear. The whispers grew louder with every step, voices mixing in fear and sorrow. His skin crawled. It was the sound of people hiding, waiting, praying to not be found. Finally, the girl stopped. Before a heavy metal door at the end of the passage. It was old, dented, covered in strange locks. She reached up with trembling hands and tapped 3 times in a careful rhythm. Knock, knock, pause, knock. The whispers inside stopped instantly. Silence pressed so heavy it was hard to breathe. Then slowly the door creaked open. A thin light spilled out, pale and flickering. Daniel's eyes widened. Behind that door was not one secret, but many. Dozens of small eyes stared back at him from the darkness, glowing faintly like the girl's. Faces half-starved, pale and scared. Children, all of them alien, all of them silent. The girl squeezed his hand and whispered, "This is why I called. You." Daniel's heart sank. The hidden alley was not just a path. It was a doorway to something far worse than he had imagined. And deep inside, he knew His life had already changed the moment he followed her cry. The air inside the hidden place was thick and heavy. Daniel's chest tightened as he stepped past the metal frame. The old door creaked behind him, shutting slowly until the sound of the outside alley was gone. The faint light came from broken lamps hanging above, their glow weak and trembling. But even in that dim light, Daniel could see the truth. The room was crowded with small figures, alien children, thin and pale, their glowing veins faint under fragile skin. Some crouched together in corners, others leaned weakly against the walls. Their eyes were wide, watching him in silence. Every pair of eyes carried fear, hope, and hunger. Daniel's throat went dry. He looked down at the girl who had led him here. Her face was wet with tears, but her eyes did not leave his. "This is them," she whispered, her voice shaking. "They have no one." Daniel stepped further in. The floor was cold, damp with water leaking from cracks above. Rust stains covered the walls, chains hung loose in places, old and broken. This was not a home, not even a shelter. It was a cage. The door clanged shut. Behind him, with a sharp echo, Daniel spun around, his heart leaping. But no one stood there, only the heavy metal door sealed tight with locks. It felt like a trap, like he had been lured into something he could never leave. "Why bring me here?" Daniel whispered, his voice low. He could not stop himself from glancing again at the locked door. "What do you want from me?" The girl's small hand gripped his sleeve again, tighter than before. Her eyes glowed softly as she looked up at him. "They said humans are cruel, that you will not care," she said, her words trembling. "But I saw you. I knew you would listen." Daniel's heart pounded. He wanted to deny it, to tell her she was wrong. He was just a mechanic, not a fighter, not a savior. But the way the children stared at him, silent, waiting, pulled at something deep inside. He moved slowly, kneeling down. One of the children closest to him flinched, hiding her face. But another, smaller one, reached out with trembling fingers. Daniel hesitated, then gently touched the child's hand. It was cold, too cold. And in that moment he understood their weakness was not only hunger, it was fear. Fear that the next knock at the door would not be a friend, but a captor. He looked at the girl again. Her tears rolled silently down her cheeks. "They come at night," she whispered. "They take the strongest. They sell them, and we never see them again." Daniel felt his stomach twist. He glanced again at the locked door, his mind racing. He could hear faint sounds beyond it now. Shuffling feet, muffled voices. Whoever came and went through that door was close, maybe watching already. "Why me?" Daniel asked again, his voice sharper now. The girl shook her head. "Because you are human. Because they do not expect a human to care. You can walk where we cannot. You can speak where we are silenced. You can carry the secret, if you choose." Her words cut deep. She was right. Humans were outsiders in this city, ignored and sometimes hated. No one would ever expect him to be here. But carrying their secret meant danger far beyond his understanding. The locked door was more than wood and metal. It was a barrier between him and the truth of a hidden world. The whispers of the children rose again, soft, broken voices in their alien tongue. They looked at him as though waiting for an answer, as though he was already chosen. Even if he had not chosen himself, Daniel's hands shook. He pressed his palm against the cold metal door. It vibrated faintly, like something on the other side was alive, waiting. His mind screamed at him to leave, to break free, to run. But his heart told him he had already stepped too far. He was part of this now, whether he wanted it or not. The girl whispered again, her voice breaking. "Tomorrow they will come. If no one helps, if no one speaks, they will all be gone." Daniel closed his eyes. He felt the weight of the room pressing on him. The locked door stood tall behind him, a wall between safety and truth, but the children's eyes chained him more than any lock could. He knew that if he walked away, their faces would follow him, forever. The silence grew heavy again. The girl's hand slipped into his, her small fingers trembling, and Daniel realized that the locked door was not just metal. It was the point of no return. Once he chose, there would be no turning back. The room fell into silence. The locked door behind Daniel felt like a wall that would never open. The air was heavy, damp and cold. The alien children huddled together in the corners, their glowing veins faint like dying stars. Daniel's mind spun with questions, but the girl's trembling hand pulled him forward, toward another shadow. At the far end of the room, there, hidden behind old crates and broken pipes, was another door. This one was smaller, half buried in the floor. Rust covered its edges, and chains once tied across it now lay broken. The girl dropped to her knees, her small fingers tracing the cracks around it. Her voice shook as she whispered, "The secret is below. You must. See?" Daniel hesitated. The locked door behind them was already a danger. Why open another? But the children's eyes followed him, wide with silent pleading. He felt as if every breath in the room begged him to keep going. The girl pressed against the floor door. It creaked open slowly, the hinges crying out like wounded metal. A gust of air escaped, colder than the room above. It carried the smell of rot, smoke, and something sharp. Daniel's stomach twisted. This was no safe place. This was a grave. Down there. The girl whispered, pointing, her glowing eyes filled with tears again. "They are waiting, they are afraid." Daniel leaned forward. A narrow staircase led downward into darkness. He could not see the bottom, only shadows swallowing each step. For a long moment he stayed still, his heart pounding. Every part of him wanted to close the door and walk away. But he knew he couldn't. Not anymore. He placed his foot on the first step. The sound echoed down into the unseen depths. The girl followed behind him, her glowing skin the only light guiding them. Step by step, they descended. The air grew colder, heavier. Daniel could feel the weight of the world pressing down on his shoulders. Whispers began to rise, faint at first, then clearer, voices calling out in broken tones. He couldn't understand the alien words, but he felt their meaning: fear, hunger, sorrow. It was a chorus of suffering. Every whisper carried the weight of children who had already lost too much. Finally, they reached the bottom. The sight before him froze Daniel where he stood. A vast underground chamber stretched into the shadows. Broken stone pillars rose like the bones of a forgotten beast, and scattered across the floor were dozens of small mats, thin blankets, and scraps of food. Children lay there, weak and trembling, some barely able to lift their heads. Others sat silently, holding each other, as if afraid the dark would swallow them. Daniel's chest tightened. He had never seen such suffering. The glowing veins of the children flickered faintly, dimmer than candles about to die. They looked more like ghosts than living beings. The girl stepped forward, her small voice rising above the silence. "This is where they hide us when the hunters come. This is where they keep the forgotten." Daniel swallowed hard, his throat dry. He wanted to speak, but no words came. He walked slowly among the children, his boots scraping. Against the stone floor, some flinched at his shadow. Others reached out weakly with trembling fingers. Their eyes followed him with a desperate hope that cut deeper than any blade. He knelt beside one boy, smaller than the rest. The boy's skin was pale, his glow so faint it was almost gone. Daniel touched his hand. It was ice cold, the boy whispered, something weakly in his alien tongue. Daniel could not understand, but he felt it. It was a plea, a cry too weak to rise. Daniel looked back at the girl. Her tears ran freely down her cheeks. "They will take them tomorrow," she said, her voice breaking. "They will sell them and they will vanish forever. No one comes back, no one." Daniel's heart pounded. The sound of chains rattling above echoed faintly, reminding him of the locked door. Time was running out. If what she said was true, by sunrise this hidden place would be emptied, and the faces staring at him now would be gone forever. He stood slowly, looking at the chamber again. This was not only suffering, it was a secret prison, a world hidden below the city where no law, no mercy, No hope existed. And somehow, he had been chosen to see it. The girl had pulled him into their darkness, and now their fate rested in his trembling hands. The children whispered again, a wave of soft voices rising in the cold chamber. Their words mixed together, broken and weak. But Daniel didn't need to understand their language. He knew exactly what they were asking. They wanted him to be the one who carried their secret, the one who stood when everyone else turned away. Daniel's knees felt weak. The weight was too much. He was just one man, a stranger in a city that already hated his kind. What could he do? But as he looked again into the girl's glowing eyes, he knew one thing for certain. If he walked away now, their cries would follow him forever, and he would never forgive himself. The chamber grew silent again. Only the drip of water from the ceiling echoed through the dark. Daniel closed his eyes. He had seen the secret below, and it broke him. The last chain groaned under Daniel's hands. Blood ran down his fingers as he pulled, the iron cutting deeper into his skin. The footsteps above were growing louder. The hunters were coming, their shadows already stretching across the staircase. The children clung together, their glowing eyes wide with fear. The girl whispered again, her small voice trembling. "Please don't stop, please." With one final surge of strength, the chain snapped. The bars swung loose, the tunnel beyond opening like a throat gasping for air. Light flickered faintly. At the far end, a way out, a chance at freedom. The children gasped, their whispers turning to cries of hope. Daniel turned, his chest burning. But before he could speak, the sound of metal boots struck the stairs. The hunters were here, tall, figures in dark armor, their faces hidden behind masks that gleamed faintly in the glow. Each carried long weapons, cold and sharp. Their presence filled the chamber like a storm. The children froze, their hope shattering into silence. One of the hunters stepped forward, his mask tilting toward Daniel. A low voice echoed from behind it. "You should not be here, human. Leave, and maybe you live. Stay, and you die with them." Daniel's breath shook. His body screamed to run, to dive into the tunnel and save himself. The way was open now, he could escape. But as he looked at the girl clutching his sleeve, her tears glowing like tiny stars, he knew the truth. If he left, she would vanish like the others, and their cries would haunt him forever. The girl whispered, her voice breaking. "You saw, you know. We are not just children. We are property, marked and sold. We are less than animals to them." Her words tore into Daniel's heart. She pulled back her sleeve, revealing the mark burned into her skin. A brand of ownership, carved deep, glowing faintly with cruel energy. She wasn't only crying for herself. She was crying for all. Of them, this was the secret she had carried, the truth that broke him. Daniel staggered, his chest tight. He had seen slavery in old stories, in whispers of history, but never like this. Never with children who glowed like stars being treated like trash. His throat burned, his vision blurred with rage and sorrow, and in that moment, something inside him shattered. The man who wanted to stay small, unseen, forgotten. He died there. What rose in his place was something harder, fiercer, unstoppable. The hunter stepped forward, his weapon raised, but Daniel moved first. He grabbed a broken chain from the ground, the metal heavy in his bleeding hands. With a roar, he swung it wide. The chain cracked against the mask, sparks flying as the hunter stumbled back. The children cried out, their voices rising. The other hunters advanced, weapons ready. Daniel planted himself between the children and the stairs. His chest heaved, his body shaking with pain and fury. "Not one more," he shouted. His voice echoed through the chamber, strong and unbroken. "You will not take one more." The girl clung to the tunnel entrance, her eyes glowing bright with tears. The children began to move, crawling, stumbling, rushing toward the opening, one by one. They slipped into the tunnel, their whispers rising into a chorus of hope. Daniel stood alone, holding the line. Every blow, every step, every breath burned through him like fire. The hunters struck. Blades flashed. Chains clashed. Daniel fought like a man who had nothing left to lose. Every strike was fueled by the faces of the children, By the tears in the girl's eyes, pain tore through him, but he did not fall. He refused to fall. The last of the children slipped into the tunnel, the girl among them. She turned back, her eyes locking on his. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Thank you." Daniel smiled weakly, though blood ran down his face in her eyes. He saw what he had fought for. Not himself, not survival, but something greater, hope. The hunters closed in, their shadows drowning him. But Daniel did not move. He stood tall, his body broken but his spirit unshaken. Behind him, the tunnel, stretched toward freedom, and he knew the children would live. That was enough. The chamber shook with the clash of steel and cries of rage. But Daniel's heart was quiet. He had made his choice. And though it broke him, it also made him whole. Far above, unseen by the hunters, the city slept, unaware that in its dark belly one human had chosen to stand. One human had carried a secret that would soon spread, a secret that would shatter chains across the galaxy, and in the end it began with a single cry in the street. A girl's voice saying, "Come with me," and a human who answered. The underground chamber was silent except for the faint sound of water dripping. The children huddled closer together, their glowing veins dim like fading lights. Daniel stood in the center, his breath heavy, his mind racing. He had seen too much, more than he ever wanted, and now the weight of the secret pressed on him like a stone he could not throw away. The girl tugged at his sleeve, her eyes wide and frightened. "They will come," she whispered, her voice trembling. "They always come at night." Her words echoed in the chamber, and the children lowered their heads as if those words carried a curse. Daniel's pulse quickened. He glanced at the staircase leading up, the one they had used to come down. It stood in the corner like a throat-swallowing light. The silence around it was too heavy, too sharp. And then he heard it. Soft, careful footsteps. He froze. The girl's grip on his hand tightened until it hurt. She looked up at him with tears shining in her glowing eyes. "They are watching," she whispered, barely able to speak. Daniel turned toward the staircase. Shadows moved above, shifting against the faint glow that leaked through the cracks. For a moment he saw a figure, tall, broad, with a mask that gleamed faintly in the dark. It stayed still, silent, only watching. Daniel's stomach turned cold. "They know," the girl said, her voice breaking. "They know I brought you here." Daniel's mind spun. Who were these watchers, these hunters? Why did they come every night? But the answer was already in front of him. This was a trade, a business. The children were not just prisoners, they were stock, sold piece by piece to whoever paid. The figure above shifted again. Daniel stepped forward, his fists clenched. But as soon as he moved, the watcher slipped back into the shadows. Silent as smoke, Daniel's heart pounded harder. They weren't just hunters, they were predators who enjoyed the chase. The girl tugged him toward the center of the chamber. "Don't go," she begged. "They are many if they know you are. Here they will kill you first." Daniel's jaw tightened. He wasn't afraid of dying. Not really. What crushed him was the thought of these children. The thought that if he failed, they would vanish tomorrow and no one would even know. The whispers of the children grew louder. They spoke in their alien tongue, voices trembling. Some cried softly, hiding their faces. Others stared at the staircase as if expecting death to walk down at any moment. Daniel felt the air thicken with fear. A faint scrape echoed from above, like metal dragging across stone. The sound crawled down the staircase. Daniel stepped closer, his body tense, but nothing came. Only silence. It was a cruel game. The watchers wanted them to feel trapped, to drown in fear before they struck. Daniel's hands shook. He wasn't a soldier, not a fighter, but standing here with so many small eyes looking at him, he felt something stir inside. A fire he had forgotten, the fire to protect, to stand when no one else would. He turned back to the girl. Her tears glowed on her cheeks. "What do they want?" he asked, his voice low. She swallowed hard, her lips trembling. "They want us weak. Afraid, easy to take, they watch until we break. Then they come for the strongest." Daniel's chest burned. His mind screamed at him to run, but his heart whispered something else. Stand. If he left now, If he let fear win, then tomorrow the watchers would win too and the children would be lost. The silence stretched again, the shadows above shifted once more. This time, Daniel did not flinch. He stepped forward. Standing tall beneath the staircase, his voice echoed into the dark, firm and sharp. "Come down if you want me," the girl gasped. The children stared in shock. No one had ever spoken back to the watchers. The shadows above froze, silent. Daniel's heart thundered in his chest, but he refused to step back. Minutes passed like hours. Finally, the shadow moved away. The sound of footsteps retreated, fading into the distant silence. The watchers did not come down, but Daniel knew they hadn't left. They were still there, still circling, waiting for their chance. The girl pulled at his arm again, her voice breaking. "They will come back. They always do." Daniel looked down at her, then at the frightened children. He nodded slowly. "Then we won't wait for them," he said, his voice heavy with determination. "We will find a way out, before they take you," the children whispered again, their voices rising with faint hope. For the first time, Daniel saw something in their eyes that wasn't only fear. It was belief. Belief in him. But above, unseen in the shadows, the watchers lingered. Their silent eyes followed every move. They would not stop. And Daniel knew the real fight was only beginning. The chamber was quiet again, but the silence was heavy. The children huddled close, their eyes glowing faintly like stars trapped in the dark. Daniel stood near the staircase, his fists clenched, his heart still pounding from the voice he had thrown into the shadows. The watchers had retreated, but he knew they hadn't left. They were waiting, circling, patient as hunters who knew their prey could not escape. The girl held his arm tightly, her small body shaking. "You should go," she whispered, her voice breaking. "If they find you here, you will die. They kill humans first, they do not even ask questions." Daniel looked down at her, her glowing eyes wet with tears. For a moment, her words tempted him. He could still leave, slip away through the hidden alley before the watchers struck again. He could save himself, no one would blame him. He was only one man alone in a city that wasn't his. But when he turned his head and saw the rows of frightened children staring at him, he knew he could not walk away. Daniel's voice was low but firm. "If I leave, who will stop them?" The girl shook her head, her tears falling. "No one stops them. That is why we hide, that is why we pray, but no one comes, no one." Her words cut deep into him. She wasn't only speaking about tonight, she was speaking about years, about endless nights of fear, children stolen in silence, sold, broken, forgotten. Her voice trembled with the weight of every one of them who never came back. Daniel felt his throat tighten. He had always lived small, always kept his head down, work, survive, pay debts, repeat. He had never been anyone's hero. But now, in this cold chamber, with these children's glowing eyes locked on him, he realized something he had never admitted before. Heroes weren't born, they were made by choice. And the choice was in front of him now. The sound of chains rattled above. The watchers were moving again. The air grew colder, heavier. Every child in the chamber froze, holding their breath. The girl pressed her forehead against Daniel's arm, whispering through her tears. "If you stay, you will die with us. If you go, you will live, please. Please choose life." Daniel closed his eyes. Her words were true. He could live if he left. But could he live with himself? Could he carry the memory of their faces, their whispers, their broken cries? He imagined walking away. He saw their glowing eyes fading in the dark as the watchers dragged them away one by one. The vision crushed him. The heavy scrape of the upstairs door echoed, metal against stone. The hunters were coming. Daniel turned to the children. They were whispering to each other now, voices shaking. Some clung to each other, some cried silently. They were waiting for the end, too used to it, too tired to hope. Daniel felt fire rise in his chest. He stepped into the center of the chamber, his voice sharp. "No more waiting," he said. The children looked up in shock, their whispers falling silent. Daniel pointed toward the back wall. There must be another way out. There always is. If they bring you here, then they must take you out. Show me. The girl blinked through her tears. Her small hand trembled as she pointed to a corner covered in crates. There, she whispered. They use it when they come, but it is locked, always locked. Daniel moved quickly, shoving aside the crates. Behind them was a narrow passage sealed by heavy bars, chains wound around the metal, old and rusted. But beyond the bars, Daniel saw faint light. A tunnel that led somewhere else. His heart leapt. This was their chance, their only chance. He pulled at the chains, his hands burning as the metal cut into his skin. The children crowded closer, their glowing eyes wide. Some of them whispered in hope, others in fear. The girl knelt beside him, tugging at the chains with her small hands. Her tears fell onto the cold iron. We cannot open it. We tried many times. It never breaks. Daniel gritted his teeth, his muscles straining. The sound of footsteps echoed above, louder now, closer. The watchers were descending, time was running out. He pulled again, his hands bleeding. With a sharp crack, one chain snapped. The children gasped. Daniel roared, pulling harder. Another chain gave way, clattering to the floor. The tunnel was opening. The girl's glowing eyes widened. Her tears turned to sudden hope. You can do it, she whispered, her voice breaking. You can free us. But the footsteps above thundered louder. The hunters were almost at the stairs. Daniel's chest pounded as he pulled at the last lock. He had no more time. He had to. Choose run now through the tunnel alone or stay, fight, and free them all. The choice burned inside him. And in that darkness, surrounded by fear, he knew. His decision would either save them or break him forever.